You need to go look at everything that you're doing in a given day, and you need to subtract about half of it. You are doing way too much. You are not focusing on yourself. The more that you can focus on yourself and your own feelings, your own emotions, do you like doing the things that you're doing every single day? Like literally think about and feel in each moment, each meeting, each conversation, each task, each thing. Do you even enjoy what you're doing?
Welcome to another episode of the 0 to 100 podcast show. This is Gabriel Hamill, and I'm here with my co-host, Travis Dillard. Our other co-host, Mitchell England, will not be joining us today. Slacker, Mitch is enjoying his version of time freedom at his annual Dungeons & Dragons live reenactment. I may have made that up. However, this show is not about judging Mitch on his extracurricular activities. The 0 to 100 podcast show is all about achieving time freedom through cash flow real estate. And we have a very special guest today here to share his story, Mr. Kassidy Warren. Kassidy Warren is a former engineer and IT manager who quit his job, turned to van life, and started his own consulting business and invested in real estate. Kassidy got started by renting out his spare bedroom for $35 a night on Airbnb and now has a $13 million portfolio of short-term rentals and hotels. Kassidy is building a top-tier hospitality brand centered around guest experience, design, wellness, and integration with nature. That is super cool. I'm excited to get into your story. Kassidy, welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast show.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Where are you calling in today? Where you at, Kassidy?
Great question. As part of this whole journey, one of the things that I wanted to do, my wife and I wanted to do, is be down in the sun more during the winter. And so we're in Tucson, Arizona. This is one of the Airbnbs that we put together. And admittedly, we did design it and build it knowing that we would probably spend a lot of our time down here in this particular house. So we are splitting our time now between the Seattle area and down in Tucson.
Wait, you're using real estate to support a lifestyle? I don't think he's a good fit for this podcast, Gabe. We should probably just wrap this up.
Sure, yeah.
No, I like to just buy a bunch of units and go back to my corporate job.
Good idea. We highly recommend that.
Let's get into your story a little bit, because you actually went from a corporate job, former engineer, IT manager. I love you quit your job, van life, started your own consulting business, started investing in real estate. But I love you started with a $35 a night Airbnb out of your personal house, if that's correct, right?
Yeah, crazy story. This was like back in 2015, kind of original Airbnb days. And my wife and I had gone up to Canada for like a music festival. And I didn't know it, but we were actually staying with the hosts at that Airbnb. It was right across from where the concert was. So we're like, yeah, it's better. It's one of the benefits of Airbnb, right? Is being able to stay in neighborhoods where you might not normally be able to stay. We show up and the hosts are there. And I'm like so pissed that, because I didn't even realize. But what ended up happening was they gave us the lowdown on everything. It was like a little mastermind with them when masterminds for Airbnb didn't exist. And so we left that being like, we're going to do this. And so we spent all this time, and I should share the pictures with you. The pictures of the first listing, you would just like barf at what we put up there, because it's, the standard is so high now. But back then it was like, throw some pictures up. We did a little design. We like put on some nice sheets, but it was our spare bedroom in our condo in Kirkland, Washington. There's a bunch of consultants. There's a bunch of tech. So we knew that there would be some demand, and our goal was really just to try to cover our mortgage. And so my wife messaged me. I was at work on a Wednesday. She's like, I did it. I was like, you did what? And she's like, I listed it. It's live, and we've already got a bunch of bookings. And so that was the start. And that was $35 a night.
And you disclose, right? You disclose, hey, we live here and we're renting out a room.
Yeah. And at that time, we only had one shower. So in the listing, because you gotta set expectations, right? In the listing, we were like, hey, coordinate the shower time, because there's going to be 3 or 4 of us and only one shower.
Good thing you didn't put that shared shower. You might have had some different guests show up.
Yeah, a little different.
I owned a condo in Kirkland. Where was your condo in Kirkland?
We are, and we're actually just under contract to sell it. And I could talk about that, but we're just outside of downtown, near David E. Brink Park, basically the dock where all the high school kids and everybody is swimming during the summer. We're like a half a block up.
So I lived in an old condo, had like an older pool, but it had an elevator. It was right on the lake. And you could look out and you'd walk out to that park and walk. Was that the same complex?
We're not the same complex. No. I know exactly which one you're talking about. We're in a fourplex. And so it's kind of like a townhome vibe, more than like a condo hotel kind of situation.
You guys were neighbors.
We were. Yes.
Yes, I think people forget like Airbnb, when it started, it was a lot of like bedroom and even couches, and it wasn't what it is today. So
it's the ultimate house hack. It's like the scrappiest of house hacking. I love that.
That's what it was. We were house hacking. We didn't know the term back then, but that's what it was. It was house hacking. And we didn't want long-term renters. We were more comfortable with transient guests. We were travelers. We understood travelers because that's who we were. And we understood budget accommodations because that's what we were doing at the time. And so it made a whole heck of a lot of sense. Everyone else in our family, like thought we were absolutely crazy. They could not believe. And I was coming home from my work break or from work on my lunch break to turn it. My wife was doing the same thing. This is before working remotely, but I was just like a 10-minute drive. And so I would like be on calls while I'm like cleaning the spare bedroom. We're answering guest messages. We're understanding the review system. We're understanding what guests need or what they like or they don't like the check-in. So basically that was our test. That was our like, oh, we get this. We understand this. And we covered about 3/4 of our mortgage, which was great because that helped us reduce expenses and go, live a better life. And the other thing that I want to mention is, I mentioned the shared shower, the one shower. I was like, well, why don't we remodel our primary bedroom, put in a full suite, a bathroom suite, and then we can expense that because it's actually to give an amenity back to the guests in the spare bedroom. And so we were able to, not the whole thing, but we were able to depreciate a lot of what we used to renovate our main bedroom and the bathroom that we did in there. So we got a whole better setup, but it was also to serve the guests. So we were able to write off a lot of that.
Well, so our guests that are listening, depreciation in real estate is an amazing tool. You're increasing the value of your real estate. If you're building a project, if you're building something or remodeling something, adding a guest suite, et cetera. But in the IRS, you're adding a structure that depreciates in value so you can reduce that off of your income, which reduces your taxes. It's a tool that all real estate investors use. So I just wanted to interject that for those people like, why would you put something in that depreciates? It doesn't depreciate. It appreciates. You just get a tax break.
Yeah. And it's one of the things I teach in my velocity of money strategy. It's actually one of the reasons that people invest. So I think a lot of your listeners are probably investing for cash flow, which is like the first level of investing. Like once you get up and through further along in your journey, and the sooner that you can do this, getting to invest for both tax benefits and appreciation, that's when everything really starts to unlock. And if a lot of your listeners are W-2 employees or consultants, 1099, maybe they own their own S Corp agency or something like that, this is what I tell people. You should go buy an Airbnb as soon as you can so that you can offset and depreciate that property and reduce your tax liability. And Airbnb, really, for most people, is the only way that they can access the cost segregation depreciation benefits because of what's called the short-term rental loophole. It's not a loophole, it's just rules. But a regular person that's working a regular job can save $10, $20, $50, $100,000 in taxes by going and buying an Airbnb. It's a lot of work, but you can do it and you can cash flow and you can save a ton of money on your taxes. So
is that because you're taking essentially active losses against active? Because I know like people get into a bit of a quandary where they're saying, well, if it's technically categorized as passive losses, I can only offset passive income, which is great. I mean, it does offset the income streams that you're creating off of real estate. But you're saying now you're taking active losses because it's Airbnb. You're working full time and you're meeting sort of that litmus test of I'm contributing this many hours. Am I saying that right?
Yes. And actually, so there's two things. There's the reps flag, which is the real estate professional status flag. And that is actually more strict, or not strict, but just there's more hours you have to put in. So like if you're a real estate agent, there's more hours that you have to put in. There's more rules. For Airbnbs, you can actually put in less hours, but there's other kind of litmus tests, but they're all easily achievable. So basically like the average stay has to be under 14 or 7 nights.
That's brilliant. But then it offsets your active income, which is your W-2 income, which is a great first step.
Exactly. Whereas if you bought a long-term rental, if you just go buy a long-term rental in Midwest, that's still passive. That's passive losses. And so you can't offset your W-2 income. Airbnb or like buying a hotel are the only ways an active business or an active real estate, which is not long-term rental. It's not a multifamily project, maybe storage. I don't know the rules around storage, but a regular person can buy those. They can have another job, even getting W-2 from Amazon, Google, wherever you're working. And the taxes that you pay every month, you'll get those back as a refund at the end of the year if you do it right. And a lot of people don't know that. So that's like my first thing that I want people to realize is, especially if you have a high paying W-2 job, unless you really, really want to leave that job, my advice is that's your highest leverage activity for a lot of people. Instead of quitting and starting a whole new thing, learning a new business, learning to be an entrepreneur, not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. So if you have like high paying W-2 jobs, my advice is go buy a house that needs a little bit of work in an amazing neighborhood close by to you, put it up on Airbnb. Maybe you don't cash flow, but if you don't want to quit your job and you make a lot of money, you don't need to cash flow. So go get the tax benefits, reduce your tax bill. If you're making 200 grand a year, you could save 50 to 100 grand in taxes by doing this strategy. And then that's worth way more than the cash flow.
I think it's a great opportunity and strategy for a lot of folks. I want to shift gears a little bit and get back into your story a bit, because you didn't stop with this one Airbnb, $35 a night, which I think a lot of people do, right? Like they're like, all right, I'm covering 3/4 of my mortgage. We don't mind people in our house. This is great. And then they stop. But you scaled to, now you own 13 million in real estate. So obviously you didn't go, hey, this is nice. It's covering 3/4 of our mortgage. Let be done. I'll keep working and earning the unit on my lunch break. So what, why, and how did you scale to where you are today from that $35 a night Airbnb?
Yeah. So basically it's not in my blood to sit still and like settle or stick to a certain level. I'm always looking for ways to improve. I also desire freedom, time freedom, financial freedom. Those were big drivers. And at the time when we were doing the Airbnb, I converted from an engineer to an IT manager. I was running a huge project. It was great what we were doing, but it turned into just being like a middle manager and conflict conversations all day. And it was like that typical corporate stuff that just burns you out over and over and over and over again. And so my wife and I quit our jobs. Eventually we saved up a bunch of money, quit our jobs to basically even just get headspace to say, what do we want to do with the rest of our lives? And so then on the first day we basically lived in our van. We were planning a year, ended up being 6 months. First day of living in the van, said, we want to own Airbnbs. We want to invest in short-term rentals, and we want to be able to own them all over. And so we can go travel and basically create a lifestyle of travel around real estate. I don't fully recommend that. I recommend actually buying in one location, buy a lot in one location. That's actually my advice now after doing many.
I can't even picture you in a corporate job. I don't know you that well. I mean, we spent some time in Whistler together this last November. I can picture you cruising around in the van. I can picture you you were talking about snowboarding in Japan. You drove up there. Like, you seem very adventurous, can't sit still. I can't picture you behind a desk or at a corporate job. Like, to me, you're very much an example of time freedom and life freedom and location freedom through real estate. So I love it.
Yeah. And that's funny that you say that, because it's taken me a few times to realize that over and over again. And when I'm feeling stuck, it's because I'm not focusing on my own freedom of thought, freedom of time, freedom of activities, whatever it is. And I enjoyed the engineering job because I was in the field a lot. And so I was learning so much. I didn't know anything about anything. And so that kept me going for a long time. And then I got to the real corporate stuff and I was like, wow, this is like not who I am.
You mentioned headspace freedom. I think that's something we don't talk about a lot. We're always talking about time freedom, and that's sort of the new currency of the rich and generating time freedom through passive income. You mentioned something earlier. You said, we wanted headspace freedom, and we quit our jobs just to get that. So because we don't realize when you're working a W-2 job, man, your entire life is given to this company, and also your mindset, your headspace, not just when you're in the office, when you're commuting in, but it's also like on the weekends, you're thinking about Monday meetings, you're thinking about these things. And so just quitting everything and just thinking, there's so much you can do when you think. When you, like Gabe, he goes for walks every day with his dogs and just thinks, I'll carve out time in my schedule to stare out the window and think. And I think people underestimate how valuable that is, but it's so hard in a society like today when we're taught to constantly be stimulated with bullshit podcasts, just joking, but like stimulated with like social media and watching TV or, so yeah, I love that you said that.
But I say it all the time. Like, I actually think most of our most valuable time is to think, right? It's not when we're just busy and doing. Oftentimes, like when we spend time thinking, that's where we find peace, we find clarity, we find what it is that we want to actually spend our time and our life doing. And so people, I think, underestimate how the headspace, how valuable that time actually is to stop and spend time with your own thoughts. So I also love these.
Well, Warren Buffett spends like 80% of his time reading and thinking.
That's where I want to get to. This past year has been a big realization in how much I need to subtract. And people, I think everybody listening, you need to go look at everything that you're doing in a given day, and you need to subtract about half of it. You are doing way too much. You are not focusing on yourself. The more that you can focus on yourself and your own feelings, your own emotions, do you like doing the things that you're doing every single day? Like literally think about and feel in each moment, each meeting, each conversation, each task, each thing. Do you even enjoy what you're doing? And if you don't, you need to immediately say, no, I'm not going to do this anymore, or figure out a way to hand it off.
Or the people, certain people.
Get those people out of your life. Like, are you feeling tension and aggravation? And so our lives before we left for the van were, you wake up, we were still drinking at the time, don't drink anymore, but like you're hungover a little bit, like, or tired from the weekend or whatever it is. You drive into work, maybe you got a workout in, you work for 8 to 10 hours, you come home, you eat dinner, and you watch TV and you go to bed every single day. And then we're drinking on the weekends, we're recovering, we don't even want to think about the future because we're just recovering from everything that's going on during the week of that repetition and that W-2 and the corporate lifestyle. So we realized we needed the headspace. And the first day we said, this is what we want to do. And then we spent 6 months in the van kind of going around and taking our time. But
you've convinced me. I'm cutting Mitch out, Gabe. I'm cutting him out of my life.
Yeah. No, Cass, the values you share align so much with 0 to 100. I mean, we had a live event in November in Scottsdale, and the theme kind of became multiplication through subtraction, right? Like, how do you up-level your life by taking things out of your life that don't align with what you want? So everything you're saying just aligns so much with our tribe and our core values here. Let's kind of shift into like, how did you scale? I mean, you jumped in a van for 6 months, and you're traveling, but you're also trying to build this business. I know you want that time and location freedom and that mind space, but I also know you're a very, very driven individual. So I know you weren't doing nothing. Like, how did you build your business and, accumulate 13 million in assets by cruising around in your van and not working?
Yeah. So we did take the 6 months to like not do anything, basically. Now there was a lot of mechanical trouble and I won't get into all that, but we ended the van trip at 6 months, and I actually got a call from my old employer. They knew I was back in town and they were like, we need your help. So that sort of started my consulting career, like almost by accident. And I was able to get a rate that was like way higher than what I had ever made before. I figured out how to structure the corporation so that I could maximize my tax benefits. So S Corp. And I knew through figuring out like YouTube, I didn't take a mentorship. I didn't do anything. And I should have like gotten more help and talked to more people about all this. But basically I was like, okay, I'm going to take all my active income and I'm going to funnel it into real estate, because that's what the rich people do. They make a ton of money on their business and then they go buy a bunch of real estate, and we're going to do it with short-term rentals. And so over the next 5 years, my wife and I continued to do consulting work and took all that money and funneled it to every single real estate project. We didn't raise any money, which again, I don't necessarily recommend unless you have the right structure or team in place and you just want to funnel your own money into your investments. We probably should have raised more money. We probably should have leveled up our skills over that 5 years. But what we did is we took all of our active income and we poured it into the real estate. And so we paid almost zero taxes because of cost segregation and depreciation. And we own 9 cash flowing short-term rentals, with each one being basically more expensive, more renovations, forcing appreciation on every single one. We did some cash out refis to then go buy other ones. And so that was the formula. Every 6 months, down payment, furnishing, renovation, get the Airbnb listed as soon as possible, do a refinance if we thought we wanted to, and then go buy another one.
And were these in one area or are these scattered throughout the country?
Yeah. What was your criteria for looking and buying these single family houses?
Yeah. So the first one was in Cleveland, Ohio, which we also just sold. And we owned that one for 5 years. And that one was like purely a business decision around, we've got this budget, we can afford kind of this down payment, this much in renovations. And we were looking at like basically price of house to revenue in the market. And that's a good metric for people to look at. Like, what's my average median home price versus how much revenue I can make in a market on a short-term rental. And so that was Cleveland for us for the first one. We got that one done in 3. We always do a little bit of renovations, and we're trying to do value add so that the property is worth more in the end. There's a lot of Airbnbs now where they're just pouring a ton of cash for all the amenities and all the furnishings, and like basically they're hedging against cash flow. And I don't think the properties are necessarily worth what they've put into it. So our criteria was always, as an exit, we need to be able to get all of our money back when we sell. If we had to, like day one, if we had to sell, we could get all of our money back at a minimum. And so all of our updates and all of our renovations were so that that property would be worth more in the end. And then, so that was Cleveland. Then we went down into Tucson, where we broke down in the van. That's how we found Tucson.
Was it down by the river?
Yeah.
Was it like a Westie? Sorry, I digress.
So no, great question. We actually bought one that was imported from Japan. It was a Toyota diesel high ace. Think like it looks like a Westie, but it's a Toyota 4Runner looking kind of van.
So super unique that no one knows how to work on. No one knows how to work on this van. So you're stuck in a parking lot in Tucson. Get back to your story.
Yeah. So you get it. So then we started buying a Tucson, and we learned that our model of basically, we would basically create resort style properties in Tucson. And my wife and I's design style lends itself to combining the old with the new. And so the architecture and structures in Tucson are like kind of old Mexico and different brick styles. So there was a lot of things that we could work with really easily that we loved. And so our designs really were highlighted, and we can kind of do anything. And so we created these really cool properties, and we would renovate bathrooms when a lot of people didn't, but that created a lot of value for the property. And so that was one of the reasons why we did that. And then in pool resort style, like, people like to have nice bathrooms now. And I think that set us apart. And by having all of our properties, the majority of our properties in Tucson, because we have a couple up in the islands of Washington near where we live, but having all of these properties in Tucson allowed us to essentially consolidate all of our labor. And so we were able to leverage the handyman, the cleaners, the repair, the pool person for all the properties. And that makes it a lot easier to coordinate things and respond to emergencies. And so I really do recommend, if you're going to do more than one property, like do it in the same area. And you sacrifice cash flow a little bit if there's like another area that's like going to kill it. But I think if you're planning on doing multiple and 2 and 3 and 4, having one team for all of your properties in one area makes it so much easier.
How many hours would you say that you spend probably? It sounds like you built out good systems and processes. You've got an engineer mind. I love the fact that you and your wife are so aligned, by the way. Like I think that's fantastic for people that are looking to get married. Marry someone that's like super aligned, or marry a real estate agent to get the tax benefits for the active real estate investors. But I'm just curious how many hours you guys spend, and there's no wrong answer to this, as you guys are running your Airbnb empire on a weekly basis, daily basis, et cetera.
Yeah, it's not too many hours because we've hired a property manager and actually a maintenance person. So a lot of property managers are good at 1 or 2 things. They're not good at like all 3 or 4 things. And so we have a property manager that handles guest communications, revenue management, listings. And then we have someone that's been with us like from the beginning that we hired, and she coordinates all the housekeeping, any messages, photos, issues, late checkouts, like on the boots on the ground, any maintenance issues, people going into the property, basically anyone that's entering the property from a cleaning and maintenance perspective, she handles all of that. Because really it's 2 roles. It's like customer service and maintenance, like real operations, right? And so a lot of times those 2 skills don't match when you're trying to find someone. And then the revenue management piece is really important. It's actually,
So is she in Tucson? Because that's another advantage to buying in clusters. Essentially, you could, or does she run your stuff in Washington, your stuff down south? I mean, help me
so
understand
they all,
that.
the team runs all the properties. Yeah, the team runs all the properties in all the locations. And that's, that's the great thing about technology is you can like manage remotely from anywhere. And we have cameras, and that actually the cameras help with operations. Did the package get delivered? Did the guest show up? Did the housekeeper show up? What's going on? Where did what happened? We hired, her name's Jen. We hired Jen after our second property, maybe our third. And she was in Tucson, but she was actually nomadic. And so she's over in another state, but she's been with us like basically from the beginning, and she has great relationships with all of our housekeepers, and she handles all the maintenance. She can call the plumbers. She can call the electricians. She knows how to get stuff done.
And what a great gig for her, by the way. If she's nomadic, you're like, look, we're nomadic. You're nomadic. Our guests are nomadic. Why don't we all just operate? Everybody wins. You can live wherever you want as long as you're available and do your job. That's a big perk for her as well, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's right. It's a huge perk. And I think where she lives, we pay her really well, considering the cost of living where she's at. So that's another benefit, given our portfolio. And I believe in paying people what they're worth. And that like actually when you start paying people what they're worth or more, then you're going to get higher talent, higher quality talent. That was a big shift over time, was like going from like pinching every penny, constraining the costs, saving, to kind of loosening the purse strings up a little bit and wanting to focus more on the people over time, because that helped with everything else. When I was like in the middle of everything, because it was like constant construction, constant project management, constant design, it was really frustrating because you're just dealing with contractors all the time. And so I got that like contractor mentality of like cutting costs and arguments all the time and like getting really frustrated. They wouldn't show up, or they did something wrong or whatever. And then that
contractors wouldn't show up. Or weird. Strange.
Yeah. So, but to answer your question, I actually spend a lot less time because I'm transitioning to hotels, and my wife basically manages that side of the business. It's a couple hours a week now, given the team that we have.
Let's talk about that. You're transitioning to hotels, and I'm curious that aligns with Airbnb's short-term rentals, guest experience. But what does that shift look like? When did you make that decision of, hey, let's go bigger. We're doing these Airbnbs. We have some success here. Why not move into hotels? I'm curious to see your mindset there, and then what actions you took in order to achieve that.
Yeah. So I got burned out again, basically, is the short answer. But what happened was we were on this project in this house, the biggest one we've ever done. We did a pool, we did a hot tub, added a bathroom. Like we spent about $250,000 in renovations on this particular house. And we showed up expecting it to be almost done. And it was like way far away from being done. But I had gotten a business coach, Dan Martell, and he basically told me, your business is not big enough. So even though we were making good money and like we were making these houses worth a lot more, he's like, your business is not big enough because you can't pay for top talent for all the things that you need to do, right? We need a designer, we need a project manager, we need a construction manager. Like we need all these people to help offset all the work that we're doing, but the business doesn't really support that. So that was a big realization. And I don't want to deter anyone from doing this, because there is a way to make it work, and you should get into Airbnb still if you're thinking about it. But what then I started doing was like, okay, well, if Airbnbs aren't it, boutique hotels are kind of the next thing, right? The logical progression. But what really clicked for me, there's two main reasons why I wanted to transition over to boutique hotels and commercial real estate. One is hotels are a team sport. You can't do everything on your own. You literally cannot do everything on your own. Maybe you buy a little 6 unit and you could try to do it on your own, and that's fine, but you're still just buying yourself a job. When you buy a boutique hotel, especially if you're buying and what I'm buying and bigger, you need other people. You need people that are better than you at things. You need a better operator. You need a better guest communications, a better construction manager. Like you need people on the team to help you run these things. And so that alleviated a lot of the stress and the work on my shoulders, and to actually build a bigger business. The second piece was the money piece, forced appreciation. So all of these properties that we had built for Airbnb, I told you that we did a bunch of renovations and we made them worth more money, right? That is forced appreciation. But on commercial real estate, forced appreciation is, yes, it's the renovations, but it's actually based on your ability to run the property better, to increase revenue, reduce expenses. And then when your profits, your NOI, your profits are higher, the actual value of the property goes up. So for example, on a hotel, if there's a manager's unit where like in the past, the managers used to stay on site, now that doesn't happen very often. And so if there's a manager's unit, we can relatively easily convert that into 1 or 2 units. And let's say after all expenses every year, we add another $50,000 of profit to that hotel. In an average market, that means that that hotel is now worth $500,000 more. It's what's called a 10 cap. And so that does not exist on residential.
Yeah, to uncap that, because in our book, we talk a lot about forced appreciation. For those of you that are listening, the best way to understand that, because people get a little spun up on cap rates. Basically, think of it like this. If it's hotel, which is commercial, self-storage, mobile home parks, apartment buildings, triple net industrial, for every annual dollar of profit you can create in the property by reducing expenses and increasing revenue, you're going to increase the value 10 to 20 times, depending on the asset, the location, et cetera. And so that's where you can force appreciate a single family house or a duplex or a threeplex, but it really depends on what the property similar to it sold down the road. So yeah, you can force it, but you don't have as much control in driving a ton of equity or building a lot of equity in an asset as you can through forced appreciation. So I know you know this, Kassidy, but I was trying to explain this to our listeners, because that was an aha for me when I learned that. I was like, oh man, like you can start with the end in mind, which is really cool. And I have we own a boutique hotel, and it's a pain in the ass because we buy mostly mobile home parks, and a pain in the ass for us because it's not our lane, right? This is your lane. You understand hospitality, you understand guest services, but that's actually what we're doing. We have a manager on site. We're the dumbasses that kept their on site. It's like a 10-unit hotel, and it's way too small to have an on-site manager and the salary and everything. So we're getting the remote keypads, the cameras, and all of that, and we'll be exiting the manager and then rehabbing her unit. So we're reducing expenses dramatically. So I love that you're saying that, because that's a relatively easy way to drive, like you said. How hard would it be in that example? You said we just turned the manager's unit, put it online to grab revenue, and you made $500,000 in equity. How hard would it be to create $500,000 in equity in even one of your nicest single family rentals?
That was this one. Like that's what we did on this one, is we created $500,000 of equity by spending $250K in about 7 months of work. But the cash flow is not even going to be as great. And that's one example on creating $500,000 of equity, is just the manager's unit. So on hotels, that's the other thing with hotels, is you have so many more levers that you can pull. One of the other levers is, let's say you add like a sauna, cold plunge, or some amenities that are spa-like or resort-like. You can now charge a resort fee, a $15, $20 resort fee to use the amenities. And those fees go to your bottom line without any more expenses, right? Now, there's some expenses from obviously operating the amenities, but not anywhere that's going to really impact the value. So with boutique hotels, you have a lot more levers. You have the fees, you have converting the manager's unit, you can be staff light if you're doing the remote check-in, your guest messaging. You can leverage, a lot of times, like these boutique hotel owners aren't on all of the online travel agencies like Expedia and Booking and Hotels.com, and they're not using dynamic pricing. And so the pictures suck. So even through operational improvements, and marketing, like taking better photos and doing a review campaign, there's so many things you can do to control that asset, to increase the value of the property and increase your cash flow. You're really kind of limited on the Airbnb side. And then that, even if you increase the revenue, so let's say you buy a $500,000 house in a $600,000 neighborhood, you do some renovations and you make it worth $600,000, right? Let's say you bring in $1 million in profit. Like it's just absolutely crushing. For some reason, you're making $1 million.
Still worth $600,000.
Still worth $600,000. Exactly. And so, but on the hotel side, it's all based on your ability to increase the profit of the property. And you have so many more levers that you can pull to do that.
How are you parlaying into hotels? So you're doing single family houses, you're dumping a bunch of your W-2 income into homes, you're renovating it. Because a lot of people might be thinking like, well, that's great, Cassie, but how am I going to go buy a freaking hotel? Like, how do I come up with the money? The lending's different. You're not getting 30-year fixed rate mortgages. You're getting commercial loans, which is usually 5 to 10-year balloons. You're putting 25 to 35% down. The rates are higher. Like, who finances these things? Like, tell us a little bit how you sort of, the back end financing, capital raising, debt, equity, et cetera, as you start buying these boutique hotels. How big are these average hotels? Where are they at? Like, give us sort of a rundown on the business model a little bit more.
Great question. And all of the probably most common questions and fears that people have about moving into boutique hotels. And so I'll just start out by saying that all of this is solvable. People have been buying this stuff for years and decades and centuries. And so you can figure it out. Number one, I think get into a community or get around a mentor to help you learn and walk through this stuff. If you want to level up, you need to be willing to do what it takes to go do that. And so I don't think anyone could necessarily buy a boutique hotel on their own unless they've done it before. So the great thing in terms of the financing, there's a few different options. One is seller financing, meaning the seller will act as the bank. And it's mutually beneficial because instead of giving them the whole lump sum of buying the hotel out from under them, you can actually do a smaller down payment so that their tax liability is less because they take less cash as the down payment. You put less cash into it. You don't have to put the 35% down that another lender might require. The seller might take 5%. And then you just pay them on a monthly basis, usually a lower rate than what you would get from a bank. And so they get kind of a retirement check from this asset. And then they don't have to deal with it, right? A lot of these, they're baby boomers or they're kids that don't want anything to do with the hotel anymore. They've owned it for a long time and they don't want to run it anymore. And it's run down or needs some improvement. And so they're willing to do seller financing because they know more about commercial real estate and lending. So that's a benefit. The other piece is usually you will have to raise money. And so that was a big fear of mine going from residential into commercial. I was going to have to build the skill of raising money. And so what I'll say is in the beginning, the best thing you can do is start talking about your desire to buy hotels and say, I am buying boutique hotels, and go tell anyone that wants to listen that you're buying boutique hotels and get clear on why you're buying them or what you're looking to buy. So I'll give you my little spiel. I buy in the $2 to $12 million price range. I'm looking for assets that have value add. So meaning I can come in and do renovations and improvements, both operational and cosmetic. I want coastal or national park or high demand existing locations. And I want at least 20 units, if not more, so that I can maximize the scale without being too big. And our exit strategy is to either exit to a hedge fund investor, like a larger investor, or another syndicator. But I'm looking, basically for seller financing options and to increase the value so that we can refinance or exit around year 3 to 5 to 7, depending on the market.
I'm a big believer in everything you're saying. You may or may not know, but the majority of the properties I've purchased, especially in those early days, it was all seller financing, all creative financing, and very much similar. I just told the world, it's like pre-social media. I'm just telling everyone I know, even though nobody I knew was involved in real estate or business, hey, I'm buying this types of property in this area. And it's amazing how those conversations turn into deals. So fast forward to today, there is social media. Are you telling friends and family and the people you see in line at the grocery store and social media, or who are you telling this to?
Yes, everybody. Yes, and yes. So I'll give you an amazing example because my goal is to build what I'm calling kind of art in nature with these hotel resorts. You could think of like the Almangiri, the Oneras, the Live Oak Lakes, these like really incredible hotels in nature. And so I need to go find those people that can do that, that can help me do that. So what I'm doing is I'm starting to talk about that more. I was filming a podcast in Joshua Tree. There was a guy there. He was there one day. I remembered his name. I came back 2 days later. He was just there hanging out with the guy that I was interviewing. I came back 2 days later. This is at like a horse corral. And he just starts asking me questions. And I was like, oh yeah, I buy hotels. That's what I do. And we start talking hotels. And then to the end of the conversation, he's like, hey, why don't you come by tomorrow and we can talk more about this? He's like, I'm looking to buy a hotel in Central America. I need help. He didn't know how to evaluate it. And then at the end, he's like, I kind of own a nice house. And I was like, okay. And this is a Joshua Tree, so you never know who you're going to run into. And so the next day, he sends me the location and he's like, hey, it's the Rusty Gate on the left. And I look up and it's probably one of the top 10 architectural homes in the world that he owns. It's this absolutely incredible art piece in Joshua Tree. And my wife and I got a private tour from him of this thing that essentially that's what I want to build as a hotel in nature. And so by me just saying, this is what I do, he needed help and I was able to help him. And then we sat at his house and we talked more in detail about hotels, and he wants to stay in touch and figure out how I can help him buy this hotel. So the point is, you should be telling everybody, you don't need to be sleazy and scummy, but just know what you're looking to buy and why you're doing it, and just tell people. And then you can ask them, is this something you'd be interested in? Or do you know anybody that is looking to sell their hotel or that buys hotels that I could connect with, right? This is how you get your work done and how you build your portfolio, is people need to know what you are buying.
Well, there's nothing sleazy about it, because also if you speak passionately about something and you're excited about it, which you obviously are, like that's infectious. People want to be a part of that in some way. It might be, like you said, contributing capital. It might, I've got an opportunity that I was just, I down the road, or I know somebody that might be exiting one of their hotels. I think Gabe talks about, he was telling like the waitress at the like the Thai food restaurant, and he ended up, oh, you know what? There's a house back here. And I mean, that was one of Gabe's earlier deals, but you just never know when you're excited and you're telling people about it. I had a question on the seller carry. Like, what percentage of the hotels that you buy, because in mobile home parks, for example, that's how they all transacted back in the day. This is before banks caught on that they're actually pretty good assets and they're financeable. With hotels, because when we financed our hotel, I had a relationship with our bank. And so they're like, oh, we'll do a one-off. It's sort of like, we normally don't do this. We don't want to do hotels, but because of the relationship, we'll finance this hotel. But in your case, what percentage of sort of these boutique hotels are seller carry? And then when you do want to exit the seller, what are your options? Are there certain lenders out there that specialize in hospitality lending, after you sort of season the property and fix the books and make it more professional?
Yeah, great question. Because the lending is really important, because you actually need to know what your business plan is with the property to then go figure out the best lending. So if you're buying a turnkey hotel, something that's already finished, you're not going to do any renovations, maybe do some paint, whatever, but you're not really doing an extensive renovation or trying to like improve the property at all, you don't want to go get a bridge loan with a balloon payment that's on a floating rate, because you're done. You're not going to do any work. You're not going to increase the value necessarily. So you need to go just get a fixed rate, traditional like commercial loan that is based off of the cash flow of the property.
Is that SBA? Is that other banks that specialize in that?
Yeah. There's banks. SBA is another one. That SBA, if you don't have experience, it's going to be really hard, and it's going to take 6 months no matter what.
6 months minimum. We did an RV park, not they say RV park with SBA. Yeah, great loan, but what a pain.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's why, or you just go get conventional, or there's like USDA. If you're in the right area or zoning, you can go get like a USDA agricultural loan. Like we're looking at one in Palm Springs that actually would qualify for a USDA ag loan that should be relatively easier to get than a SBA. And we're going to get a lower rate. But the other piece is bridge lending and balloon payments. So in the residential world, we don't really use these too much unless we're doing like flips and they're hard money and you get them done in 6 months and you're out, right? On the commercial side, your value is based off of your NOI, right? And so, but you need to get money to go do improvements. So you go get a bridge loan, 24 months to 36 months usually. And right now it's anywhere between 9 to 14%, depending on which bank or lender. Could be private money where they just, it's not really a bank, but they have a bunch of investors that then give the money out. There's a lot of those types of lending out there where it's a bunch of athletes that this particular institution gets athletes and celebrities, and then they go lend their money out for them, right? But what happens is you do all the renovations, you stabilize the asset, meaning you've gotten the revenue that you expected, or you know what your 12 or 24 months of revenue look like. Then you go to your conventional bank. That's when you refinance. Your property should be worth, I like to say, double what you bought it for, if you did your work right. And then you pay off that bridge loan. But you've been paying it the whole time up to that point, and it's interest only also. And the reason it's interest only is because you're lowering your expenses by not paying principal. And you know, based on your plan, that the property is going to be worth more. So you're not worried about paying the principal down on the bridge loan. And so these are all just some of the things to think about in commercial lending. The other thing was, to answer your question, the seller carryback, you have a balloon payment. Same thing though, it's at year 3, year 5. You can kind of dictate when you want that to be. And you can do interest only, same thing, because if the plan is to improve the value, then you don't need to pay the principal down on that loan, and you reduce your expenses. And then you just pay them off when you do the refinance into conventional. The other thing you can do with sellers, or this happens with bridge lending too, is maybe at year 3 is the balloon, but you bake in an extension, or then you increase the rate past that. So if you were paying a 5% rate year 1 to 3, at year 4, 5, and 6 and beyond, maybe it's a 7% rate.
Or you can pay to some points to extend.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny hearing you explain all this, very, very similar to how I've purchased, a lot of my real estate, early single families, multifamily, mixed use, commercial, mobile home park, very similar. Like people would say, well, why would you go interest only? I mean, same, we're not paying a lot towards principal those first couple of years. I know I'm going to refinance it. I'd rather cash flow more during those years. And so it's, for a lot of people, it is just breaking down easy math, make the numbers work in commercial real estate. What are you focused on? I mean, I know you're focused on the hotels right now, but how do you plan to continue to scale that? So are you going to stay with boutique hotels? Do you want to scale into, larger, big commercial type hotel, like name brand type hotels? What's on the forefront of what you're doing now?
Yeah. So we're finishing up the first one that I bought with some partners in Solvang, California. That's a 24 unit. The renovation, we basically ran it through busy season, and then we're finishing up the renovations now. That one taught me actually to go bigger. So 24 units, it was like my dream, right? My dream property. And then we're going through it, and I'm like, actually, I think I need to go bigger to bring on more team members to help do the tasks. Like a lot of us are still doing a lot of the work, and managing spreadsheets and managing contractors and that sort of thing. And so I'm going bigger. I want bigger deals. I want more design, more amenities, right? More of the vision of what I want in nature. And so there's a couple of deals that I'm already under contract on, but really what I'm focused on is I'm focused on my podcast to go meet people like you, expand my network, meet everybody and anybody that wants to talk to me essentially, and go create a network, go create my own kind of personal economy, I guess you can call it. But really just to grow my network and find the people that will help me build these art pieces in nature, build the next Amangiri, build the next Onera. I'm really passionate about wanting to build something that connects people with themselves and connects people with nature in a way that they haven't experienced before. And I know that sounds kind of funny, but I'm really into hyper wellness around sauna, cold plunge. And I know a lot of people are, but I love creating these experiences that you didn't even expect in nature and getting people out of themselves. And so that's what I want to go create next.
You already motivated me. I wrote it down actually, because we had that little boutique hotel we have, little log cabins. It's on the Columbia River. I'm like, dude, I love sauna, cold plunge. In fact, I just got out of a cold plunge before I, did this podcast and have a sauna at the house. I'm like, I'm going to go put a sauna and a cold plunge. That's such an easy thing to do.
They're low maintenance and they will crush it. Yeah, they will crush it.
Spas, on the other hand, hot tubs which we have, are on the other hand, are not low maintenance. I love that you're talking about art and nature, but you're also just not talking about dollars and force appreciation and cash on cash and IRR and equity multiples. You're passionate about this. This is something that really fuels you and gets you, I think probably gets you up in the morning and gets you excited. And I love that, because I think that's something we might miss a lot on this podcast too, is we always talk about real estate as a means to an end, but this is your end kind of. You're creating cash flow, you're creating generational wealth, but you're also doing something that you're passionate about and that you love. And I think that's really cool, man. I think you're one of the few people we've had on the podcast that get this excited about the actual product that they're delivering to their guests.
I was thinking the same thing. I mean, there's a legacy piece to it, that you talk about multiple times. You said a work of art and this masterpiece and this beautiful, place. And so that being said, these must be long-term holds if the plan is to, create an environment that you or others can go and enjoy. My assumption would be you're not looking to sell these anytime in the future once you've created this masterpiece, or maybe I'm wrong.
That's a really great question, because if you talk to Isaac French, who owned, built, and sold Live Oak Lake, and he sold it at a premium, he sold it at a lower cap rate than what everything else is selling for because of the social media following that he had. But I thought that I would never sell my properties, because that's what we've been told, is to buy and hold, and you'll become a millionaire after paying the mortgage off. And that's the way you get rich in real estate. But actually, I've realized that by selling is the way that you get rich and even wealthy in real estate. If you do the forced appreciation, because when you do the math on how much your principal pay down is compared to forced appreciation or even cash flow, your principal pay down is the lowest. Yeah, it takes 18 years really before you catch up. So I look at now, I don't know the answer to your question for these future things, but Isaac French sold his, and that thing was incredible. Ben Wolf, who has Onera and Oasi, I don't know, he sold his to a REIT, but he's also creating experiences too, but he also knows the value of the dollar.
You're okay creating a masterpiece, creating a beautiful experience, selling that, and then just continuing your growth journey with whatever it is that you are passionate about next.
Yeah, and we're selling properties now to go reinvest in myself and also into other assets.
You're selling the greenhouses, and you're going to then you're playing Monopoly. You're literally selling the greenhouses, and you're buying red hotels. It's something you mentioned too also, and I love that you said this, because this is also kind of a realization that Mitch, who you haven't met because he's a slacker, he's not here, but something that we've realized too is that you talk about forced appreciation, and you can drive a lot of near-term value and equity growth in the first 24 to 36 months. And then after that, it's kind of hard. Like, you can't continually to raise rates. At some point, there's a ceiling to that. And then that equity is sort of just sitting there, right? And you're not, maybe you're in it over time, maybe you're not getting a great return on that equity. And so we've talked about maybe buy 3 properties a year, sell 2, right? Or sell 1. Like, yeah, net gains, but also when we're starting to look at our portfolio, and when they sort of reach that ceiling, exit it and then roll that cash via a 1031 exchange or another vehicle as a down payment on a bigger property. And then now you have another runway to go, and you can force appreciate that secondary, tertiary, that fourth asset. And that's how you could, the velocity of money. It's the velocity, we call it the velocity of capital, which I did use. You literally you're doing something called the velocity of money. I don't want to skip over that. I want to hear you talk about that before we adjourn, because what a great segue. You see that, Gabe? I'm like a professional podcaster now.
You're like professional, and you have a face for radio, so it's kind of perfect.
Oh.
Well, I appreciate that, Gabe. Thank you. Anyway, so tell us about the velocity of money. Tell us about your podcast. Tell us about your mastermind. What are you doing?
Yeah, this is great, because actually what you're talking about is return on equity, and that's part of the velocity of money, is figuring out when you need to sell. I like to say in the first 3 years, like you said, is when you create the most value usually. And let's say you're trying to get a 2.5 multiple, which is what we usually target. So in the first 3 years, you might get to that 2x, right? So you've doubled your money in 3 years. You might spend the next 3 to 7 years just to get that extra 0.5 multiple. So that doesn't make any sense if you could double your money every 3 years by selling and reinvesting, doing that pattern over and over again. And so when you're looking at your properties or other assets that you have to sell, if you can sell something, and this is what we're doing right now, if you can sell something and get 6 years of cash flow, then I say do it. If you have the model to go then reinvest that, like a boutique hotel or a short-term rental or something that's gonna pay you more. But if you've got 6 years of cash flow or more sitting in an asset, for me, that's time to sell and go reinvest it and redeploy that equity. So that's part of the velocity of money, is this cycle. But really what it is, it's you guys already know this stuff. It's tax benefits, it's equity or free equity from raising money. It's leverage, which is true for every real estate asset, but leverage, and then forced appreciation. And when you combine leverage and forced appreciation, that's the magic. And then the cost segregation depreciation is really where I love to teach people because you just don't really understand it. And then the ability to raise money and get free equity into something without having to put dollar for dollar in to get that same amount of equity. And so I can go into a bunch of details if you want, but basically those are the four, what I call the four accelerators of the
No, man,
velocity
you're
of money.
speaking our language.
Yeah.
We love that.
Yeah. And if you followed me, you know that it's just basically the benefits of real estate, but I think velocity of money sounds good. And it's true if you're doing this type of model with commercial real estate. But I'm also doing, launched a podcast. It's called For Your Own Good. And I'm doing solo episodes where I'm just kind of spitting like this and teaching people stuff. And then I'm doing guest, both real estate related, but also just great people, great stories, great lessons, and things that I think you need to hear that are for your own good. That's why the name. I do coaching in other communities, but I am going to be starting a boutique hotel boot camp. It's going to be like a 2-week, like intensive. Every morning we'll get on a call and I'm going to teach you all the things that you need to do to be able to go buy a boutique hotel. And that's going to be relatively affordable for people. So I'm going to start that March 17th. And so I'll be posting about that if people want to sign up and be a part of that.
I had 3 questions, real super easy. The last one I'll leave to Gabe because Gabe knows how to ask this question better than I do. 1, how do people get a hold of you?
Yeah, on Instagram, I'm at Kassidy.Warren, and that's Kassidy with a K. And that's the best place. I answer my DMs. I post all the time.
Cool. And we'll put that in the show notes. 2, and it can be a super quick answer. Did you see hospitality dip? Like there was like the COVID high, right? Where everybody was going crazy. We saw it, at least with our nightly stay RV park and hotel, it dipped. And I feel like it's coming back up as of this recording, which is February of 2025. Am I accurate there or have I lost my mind?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. And I would also just add to that people's standards changed for what they'll accept in terms of a quality stay, like at an Airbnb.
All right, Cassie, our final question that we ask all our guests every week. If you were to lose it all tomorrow, and I don't mean just the money, the assets, you also lost your network. So you've lost all of it. What is your next move? What's the first thing you do? You wake up in the morning, you're sitting on the curb. We used to say sitting on a buddy's couch, but you don't even have a buddy. You can have your wife. You and your wife, you're on the curb. You've lost all your Airbnbs. You've lost your buddy. You've lost your network, but you have your knowledge. First morning, what do you do?
Do I have a cell phone?
You have a burner. You have 30 minutes.
I am posting to social media every hour and going live every single day. And I am going to be teaching about real estate and I'm going to be helping other people become financially free and providing some valuable service that I can teach them to go make them money. And I'm going to be on social media and I'm going to be talking about it and I'm going to be deliberate and I'm not going to stop. And I'm going to be embarrassingly annoying at how much I'm talking about it to create a reputation and build the network through social media.
Would you be teaching or would you be documenting?
Well, yeah, documenting. But then also I'd probably be hosting in-person events or like maybe teaching people how to get their first deal. But I would document my, let's call me homeless, homeless, jobless, moneyless, penniless journey to buying a real estate asset, I would say, and then helping other people along the way.
Yeah, that is cool. And notice, because I'm assuming you had a pretty high paying W-2 job, notice you didn't say, I'd go back to work. Because I think people really realize that time and headspace, kind of how we started this podcast out, time and headspace is the true asset, right? And if you go back to work and you're going back to the grind, you lose that. And so you lose that edge. So that's cool. Love that you said that. Kassidy, man, thank you so much for your time today. I'm grateful. This was really cool. I don't think we've had anybody on the show that's doing sort of experience-based boutique hotels. I can tell you're passionate about it. Can't wait to meet you in person.
Thanks, everybody.